Mr. Shaw's Shipshape Shoeshop, written by Eve Titus and pictures by Larry Ross. It says, for my son Rick, who also loves to sail the 7 seas. Mr. Sylvester Shaw was the best shoemaker in town. His shop was in an old building on an old street between Mr. Brown's bakery and Mr. Green's grocery. All day long he sat and fixed people's shoes. His shop was always neat and trim and tidy, just as shipshape as a ship, so he named it Mr. Shaw's Shipshape Shoe Shop. His cat Shoo always took naps on the top of the shoes on the shelves. There were ladies' shoes, men's shoes, girls' shoes, boys' shoes, and baby shoes. Shoes with high heels, low heels, and even shoes with no heels. Shoes with square toes, round toes, and even shoes with no toes. White shoes, black shoes, yellow shoes, pink shoes, blue shoes, orange shoes, and even purple polka-dotted shoes. Some were so old that only Mr. Shaw could make them look new again. He loved fixing shoes, and next best, he loved looking at ships and boats. Every Wednesday at 12 o'clock noon, whenever the weather was nice, he'd close his ship-shaped shoe shop and walk down to the docks. See the cat sleeping on the shoes and the sewing machine. There he'd see fishing boats and fire boats and ferries, police boats, patrol boats and barges and tugs, big ocean liners and big beautiful cruise ships. Mr. Shaw's secret wish was to sail the 7 seas of the world, to see strange faraway lands and to meet strange faraway people. But trips on ships cost much too much for Mr. Shaw. After he paid the rent to the landlord, the leftover money didn't last very long. But he liked to watch the lucky ones who sailed, how happy they looked, hurrying aboard. His favorite ship was the SS Sheba. At sailing time, the band always played, and excited passengers leaned over the rail, waving to friends who stayed behind. Sometimes Mr. Shaw waved back, pretending he knew someone who was sailing. When the ship's great whistle sounded, the Sheba would swing out towards the open sea, slowly at first, then faster and faster. Not till the big, beautiful ship was a far white dot on the waters would Mr. Shaw go back to the Shipshape Shoe Shop. One morning there was a letter from the landlord. Dear Mr. Shaw, your shoe shop is shipshape, but the building it's in is old and shaky. The fire chief says it would burn very fast if ever caught on fire, so it's not safe to stay there much longer. You and your next door neighbor, Mr. Brown the baker, and Mr. Green the grocer will have to move 30 days from now. That's when the building will be torn down by the city. Good luck. I hope you find another place for your shipshape shoe shop. Very yours truly, Shelton S. Shrewsbury, landlord. Mr. Shaw poured some milk into a saucer and said, Sad news, Shoo. After 20 long years here, I've got to go shopping for a new shop. I'll never find one with rent as low as I pay here, but at least I can try. I'll hunt high and low. Just then, in rushed the baker and the grocer to show Mr. Shaw their letters. Said Mr. Brown, I can't pay a high rent someplace else. 30 days from now, I'll have to close Brown's Bakery and start working in my cousin's cookie factory, said Mr. Green. I'll have to close Green's Grocers and go to work in my friend's fish market. Sylvester Shaw, you're the best shoemaker in town. Franklin Flair owns the biggest shoe shop in town. He's your friend. Why don't you ask him for a job? Before Mr. Shaw could speak, a big car stopped outside, and who should walk in but Franklin Flair himself. Sylvester, my friend, I heard the news, said he. Won't you come to work in my fair and square shoe shop? I'll give you good pay and workspace in my front window with a view of the harbor and the ships you love. You and Shoeshop can live in the big back room. Franklin, my friend, I'd be honored to work for you. Your fair and square shoe shop is a fine place, but I can't do it. Not just yet. Why not? Asked all three men in surprise. There's Shoeshop the kitty. Mr. Shaw stitched a strap on a sandal and said, because I'd rather shop for a new Shipshape shoe shop. In my own shop, I am always my own master, which gives me an extra special feeling. But if I worked for someone else, even for my wonderful friend Franklin Flair, I wouldn't be my own master anymore. Sylvester, my friend, I understand. Good luck. If you don't find the right shop, come to work for me. Of all my fine shoemakers, you'd be the finest by far. After everyone had gone, Mr. Shaw said to Shoeshop, today is Wednesday, my looking at ships day. Tomorrow I'll look at ships. Today I'll look at ships. I read that wrong. He says, tomorrow I'll look at shops. Today I'll look at ships. And he locked the door and left. Down at the docks, he stopped to admire Sheba, just as the sailor came off the ship carrying some shoes. Do you know of a good shoemaker? Asked the sailor. Mr. Shaw smiled. I'm a shoemaker. May I be of help? You certainly can. These are Captain Shipley's shoes. We sail tonight. How long will it take you to fix them? Mr. Shaw examined the shoes. About an hour. Sailor. I'm Sylvester Shaw of Mr. Shaw's Shipshape shoe shop. And I'm Sailor O'Shea. You should look at a man I can trust. You look like a man I can trust. Bring the shoes aboard when they're ready and ask for me. They shook hands, and Mr. Shaw hurried off with the shoes. Soon he was working hard to make them look new again. These are a sea captain's shoes, he said to Shoeshop. Imagine, they've traveled all over the world. The job done, he practically ran back to the ship, all excited and delighted at what would happen next. And then it happened. His feet marched up the gangway, and before he could say Mr. Shaw's Shipshape shoe shop, there he stood, aboard the big white ship. Up to the top deck they went, to the captain's quarters, where a crowd of people stood talking and eating. The captain came over. Glad to meet you, Mr. Shaw. I'm mighty particular about my shoes, you know, and you did just about the best job I've ever seen. Have fun at my party. Ever been aboard a ship before? I've never been on any ship. This is my first time. Really? I'll have Sailor O'Shea show you around. Up and down and around went Mr. Shaw and Sailor O'Shea, and the ship was much more wonderful than Mr. Shaw had ever dreamed. There were swimming pools and elevators and dining rooms and playrooms and libraries and lounges. The sleeping cabins were cozy with the finest of furniture. Far below were big engines that made the ship go. Up above were maps and charts and all the things the captain needed for steering the good ship Sheba safely and swiftly across the sea. Best of all, thought Mr. Shaw, everything was neat and trim and tidy, just as shipshape as his own Shipshape Shoeshop. Back at the party, the captain had news for Mr. Shaw. I've told my friends how well you mend shoes, so be prepared for more business. As for my parties, there's one every time we sail, and you're invited. Mr. Shaw thanked him and had some strawberry shortcake. Then the "all ashore" sounded loud and clear, and Mr. Shaw and the other visitors had to leave. This time, standing on shore, he waved to people he knew, and they all waved back as the Sheba sailed away. Next morning, a sailor and a ship's cook came with their captain's shoes and some of their own. When the shoes were all fixed, the sailor said, "You certainly make old shoes look new again, Mr. Shaw. Well, tell your friends on the other ships about you. We'll tell all of our friends on other ships about you." Later on, more sailors came with more shoes, but Mr. Shaw still had to close an hour earlier so that he could start shopping for a new shop. That first afternoon, Mr. Shaw did a lot of looking. Uptown, downtown, all around the town he looked, on long streets and short streets, on wide streets and narrow streets, on straight streets and crooked streets. But nowhere did he find a shop that suited him. If the shop was nice, the rent was too high. If the rent was right, the shop was too tiny, and none of them were near the harbor. So small were some shops that Mr. Shaw, this is a tongue twister. So small were some shops that Mr. Shaw saw that he knew there wouldn't be room enough for his shoe-fixing machines and his work table and his bench. All afternoon long he kept looking, and for many afternoons after that. But the more he looked, the gloomier he got, and the more tired his poor feet felt. He saw shops on dark streets. He saw shops on dirty streets. He saw shops so drab and dingy and dreary that if he had rented one of them, he would have had to put up a new sign, Mr. Shaw's Shabby, Sloppy Shoe Shop. Every day Mr. Shaw shopped for a shoe shop, whether the weather was good or whether the weather was bad. He spent less and less time fixing shoes and more time tramping the streets. He walked from morn till noon till night, and his legs ached even when he was sitting down. But it was no use. He just couldn't find what he wanted. One day he looked at the calendar on the wall and said, "Shoo-shoo? The 30 days are nearly over, and I'm tired of tramping all over town. I give up. I'll have to close my Shipshape shoe shop. I'll certainly miss it, but things could be worse. I'm glad my friend Franklin has a job for me." And he went down to Fair and Square Shoe Shop. Mr. Flair showed Mr. Shaw the big back room, and the big backyard with trees for Shoo-shoo to climb, and the sunny workspace in the front window. "Sylvester, my friend, I hope you'll be happy here. Tomorrow at noon, my trunkmen will pick up your things." Mr. Shaw stared out at the ships in the harbor. He didn't think he'd ever be truly happy again, not without his own ship-shaped shoe shop. But he said, "Franklin, my friend, I'll try to be happy. I'd better go back and pack. See you tomorrow." On the street, he saw that the Sheba was in port, and he decided to tell Captain Shipley his new address. Going up the gangway, he met Captain coming down. "Hello, Mr. Shaw. Haven't seen you aboard ship in ages. There's a party tomorrow, and I hope you'll be there." "Tomorrow's the last day of my Shipshape shoe shop. I'll probably be much too sad to come to your party." And Mr. Shaw told Captain all that had happened. "Too bad, Mr. Shaw. But if Mr. Flair's such a good friend, won't you be happy working in his shoe shop?" Mr. Shaw sighed. "Maybe I will, and maybe I won't. Isn't it great to be master of your own ship, Captain? For me, it's just as great to be master of my own shop." "True enough, Mr. Shaw. But do come to the party. There'll be good things to eat and people to meet. You'll cheer up and start smiling again, won't you come?" "I'll try," said Mr. Shaw, and he went back to his shop. Mr. Flair's trunkman arrived the next afternoon. They carried out the shoe-fixing machinery, and the bench, and the work table, and all Mr. Shaw's belongings. Mr. Shaw wiped away a tear or two, and then he said, "Please hang my Shipshape sign. Please hang my Shipshape sign in Mr. Flair's back room. It will remind me that I once had my own shoe shop." "Hop in and ride with us," said one of the trunkmen. But just then Sailor O'Shea came by in a jeep. "Captain's compliments, Mr. Shaw. He sent me to fetch you." "Goodness, I forgot about the party. May I bring my cat?" "Certainly, Mr. Shaw. Just get right in." And away they went, down to the docks, up the gangway, and straight into the captain's party. What do you think's going to happen? While he was having some chocolate ice cream, he saw Mr. Flair having some vanilla ice cream. Then the captain came over and smiled and said, "Come with me, Mr. Shaw, and you too, Mr. Flair." Down, down, down they walked, to the shop of the ship's carpenter. First the captain and Mr. Shaw, and then Mr. Flair and Sailor O'Shea. And when Mr. Shaw saw what he saw, he was too surprised to speak. Behind a wooden fence in the corner were his shoe-fixing machines, and his work table, and his bench, and even his shoe shelves. And hanging from the ceiling, not too high and not too low, was his own Shipshape sign. Mr. Flair came over and shook his hands and said, "Congratulations." But Mr. Shaw was still too surprised to say a single word. Next the captain said, "I appoint you ship's shoemaker. So many ship's people went to your Shipshape shoe shop that I brought your Shipshape shoe shop to my ship." "Sylvester, my friend, I'll explain," said Mr. Flair. "The captain came to my shop today to talk things over, and we knew you'd never be happy without your own shop, and that you'd be twice as happy with your shop on a ship. So when the trunkmen came, I had your things sent here." The captain smiled. "Shoo will be ship's cat. There will be plenty of shoes for her master to fix. This time we're off on a trip around the world." Shoo sprang to the top shelf, purring happily away. And that was when Mr. Shaw spoke at last. "My own Shipshape shoe shop on a ship? I can't find words to thank you enough, but I certainly wish I could purr." There's Shoo up here on the shelf. After all that, last I heard, Mr. Shaw and Shoo had sailed around the world 10 times. Faraway places, faraway people, they saw them all. He's known as the best shoemaker on the 7 seas, and whenever the Sheba is down at the docks, sailors from other ships all stand in line to have their shoes made new again in Mr. Shaw's Shipshape shoe shop. The end.